In 1900, if you were born in America, your life expectancy was less than 48 years. Most of us assume people back then were simply less healthy. But they weren't. Their bodies worked the same way ours do. The difference wasn't the people, it was the world they lived in. Tuberculosis, pneumonia, diphtheria, typhoid, simple infections that are now preventable or treatable were once among the leading causes of death. Then something remarkable happened. Over the next century, those deaths began to disappear. Life expectancy didn't increase by a year or two. It increased by decades. So what changed? Most of us think we already know the answer. We credit modern medicine, antibiotics, vaccines, scientific breakthroughs. That explanation sounds reasonable. It's also incomplete. When I started looking into this, I expected to find one turning point, one discovery that changed everything. Instead, I found a story that was far more complicated and much more interesting. Let's start with the baseline. Around 1900, tuberculosis was one of the leading causes of death in the United States. Imagine a room filled with your family and closest friends. Now imagine that one person develops a cough that never goes away. Over the following months, they lose weight, become weaker, and eventually die. That wasn't unusual. It happened in homes across the country. And tuberculosis wasn't the only threat. Pneumonia killed hundreds of thousands. Typhoid spread through contaminated food and water. Scarlet fever regularly swept through communities. Diphtheria could block a child's airway within days. Even diarrhea, something we usually think of as temporary, was one of the biggest killers of young children. This wasn't considered a crisis, it was simply life. Then the numbers changed. By 1950, life expectancy in the United States had risen to about 68 years. That's an increase of more than 20 years in just half a century. By 1980, it had climbed even higher. Those aren't just statistics. Every increase represents millions of people who survived illnesses that had once been routine causes of death. So naturally, I asked the obvious question, what caused it? The answer seemed straightforward. Medicine improved. Doctors understood disease better. New drugs were developed. Case closed. Or at least that's what I expected, so I started checking the timeline. And almost immediately, something didn't add up. If one invention really caused this huge drop in deaths, the timeline should be simple. The first thing everyone thinks about is antibiotics. Penicillin was discovered by Alexander Fleming in 1928, but it wasn't widely available until around 1945, after the Second World War. Here's the problem. Deaths from infectious diseases had already been falling since the 1880s. That's almost 60 years earlier. Maybe it was vaccines. The smallpox vaccine was developed back in 1796. That's long before our timeline begins. And many of the diseases killing people around 1900 didn't even have vaccines yet. Tuberculosis didn't. Typhoid didn't. Scarlet fever didn't. The measles vaccine wouldn't exist until 1963, so that didn't fit either. If it wasn't medicine, maybe it was something else, maybe it was clean water. That brings us to London in 1854. A cholera outbreak was spreading through the city. At the time, most doctors believed diseases spread through bad air. One doctor, John Snow, wasn't convinced. He thought the water was responsible. When he put everything on a map, one thing stood out. Most of the deaths were around a single public water pump on Broad Street. The water had been contaminated. After the pump handle was removed, the outbreak ended. That discovery changed the way cities thought about sanitation. Over time, cities built sewer systems and improved their water supply. It seems like a pretty convincing answer. But then I looked at the data. People living in small towns and rural areas were also living longer. Many of those places didn't have modern sewer systems, so clean water helped, but it couldn't explain everything. Then I came across Thomas McKeown. In the 1970s, he argued that the biggest reason people started living longer was better nutrition. But later, researchers looked at the evidence again, and they found problems. Some places started living longer before nutrition improved. Other places had better diets but still had high death rates because cities had become so crowded. The pattern didn't hold. So now I had 4 different explanations: antibiotics, vaccines, clean water, better nutrition. All of them mattered, all of them saved lives, but none of them fully explained why death rates started falling so dramatically. While I was going through all of this, I came across a historian from Cambridge University named Simon Schratter. He had spent years looking at the exact same question, and his answer surprised me. He wasn't looking for one cause. He said there wasn't one. Instead, all of these things were connected. Clean water. Building a sewer system sounds simple. But first, scientists had to understand how diseases spread. Then they had to convince governments. Then governments had to approve the money. Then engineers had to design the system. And in many cities, none of that happened until a major outbreak forced people to take it seriously. Every city followed a different path. Some moved earlier, some moved later, some only changed after a disaster. It wasn't one breakthrough, it was hundreds of small decisions happening over many years. And I'll be honest, I didn't like that answer. Every time I found something like penicillin or the Broad Street pump, I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe I had finally found the reason. But every time I looked deeper, the story became more complicated. And I realized something. I wasn't just looking for the truth. I was looking for a simple story, because simple stories are satisfying. One invention, one discovery, one person who changed everything. But that's usually not how history works. History is usually slower than that. Different people solve different problems. Those solutions build on each other, and over time they start to change the world. That's much harder to explain, but it's probably much closer to the truth.